All right, good evening, folks, and welcome to, the second in a series of FY21 budget hearings sponsored by the Superintendent of the Boston Public Schools, Dr. Brennan Casilius, and the Boston School Committee. We have interpretation services available this evening in Spanish and Haitian Creole. Will the Spanish interpreter please first raise his or her hand and introduce themselves? Thank you very much. And would the Haitian Creole interpreter please rise and introduce? Okay. And could you repeat that in Creole, please? Thank you very much, sir. If you need interpretive services, you can see Ms. Lena Parvex and our fellow staff people out in the hallway for a listening device. So a quick note before we get started. I want to have Superintendent Casilius speak a little bit about ongoing preparations in the district around the response to the COVID-19 virus. But I just want to remind folks that as we're continuing to monitor developments from the city and state and federal authorities, the committee will continue to consider adjustments to its meeting schedule and format. As many know, we have a statutory requirement to vote on the budget on the fourth Wednesday in March, as well as a new requirement this year to vote on a plan related to the Student Opportunity Act that must be submitted by the end of March. And so the next couple of regularly scheduled school committee meetings are vitally important for our process. Nevertheless, we want to be safe. We want to consider the needs and public health concerns of all of our fellow residents and citizens, and so we'll be monitoring these developments and guidance from those public health officials closely, and we'll keep folks up to date through the news media, social media, and on our website. So in the meantime, remember to wash your hands, cover your mouth when you cough, and if you're sick, please stay home. Your neighbors are going to thank you. So something to note, we do have a couple cameras here this evening, which is not typical for our budget hearings, but the city's cable office has been kind enough to help arrange for a remote recording of tonight's proceedings. We couldn't live broadcast this meeting like we typically do from the bowling building, but this will be recorded and will begin replaying on BNN and available on the city's website starting tomorrow. If you'd like to testify this evening, but you've not yet signed up, you can see our staff person, Ms. Lena Parvex, in the hallway. That sign up will begin at 6:30 p.m. And so before I sped through my COVID routine, but I didn't give the superintendent a chance to talk before. So before I go any further, Superintendent, if you want to give us a high-level overview of the ever-changing and developing work in the district on this virus.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and glad to see all the members here, and welcome back, Mr. O'Neill. I wanted to just give you a brief update around the coronavirus. As you know, today the governor did declare a state of emergency. What that does is give him additional rights to be able to provide response to the virus and preparation. So I think that gives him some extraordinary powers as governor. So I'm sure that is why he did that. We continue to receive a lot of questions about how we're preparing and responding to the coronavirus. Our team has a point person, Ms. Tammy Poost, that we identified several weeks ago, and she has been doing a lot of coordination with the city and with the state and with Boston Public Health Commission and the Massachusetts Department of Health. We remain in constant communication with them, and we get updated regularly, and then we also adjust our preparation from information that we are giving. Our custodians are ensuring that our schools are fully stocked with soap and cleaning supplies. They're also working really hard to keep our schools sanitary through extra cleaning of high-touch areas and in addition to their regular daily cleaning activities. I've also asked all school leaders to monitor their bathrooms at a minimum of 3 times a day, to notify the school custodian if the soap dispensers are running low or other supplies are needed. We've also put up signs, or are in the process of putting up signs in our schools so that staff are aware and visitors are aware on how to report if there is not soap and how to refill those dispensers to make sure that they know where to use those supplies. With the recent announcements of schools closing, it's understandable that families are beginning to ask if the Boston Public Schools will be closing some or all of its schools. Again, we are in close contact with the city offices as well as the Boston Health Commission and the Massachusetts Department of Health, as well as the Massachusetts Department of Education. Spoke to the commissioner today around many issues around testing and around attendance and the requirement for the number of days that we have to have. He's coming out with some guidance later on this afternoon, so I'll have much more to report to you in a few days, and so look to your emails as we continue to evolve this situation. For this time right now, school is open. And so that is because we are following the guidance of our public health officials. And again, we continue to assess this by the hour and by the day. There's many factors that have to be considered when we are closing our schools. So as we monitor the situation and determine if the school closures are going to be appropriate for us, safety will be our top priority, and also other considerations such as food access and continuity of learning and continuity of operations. Also, I want the public to know that we are continuing to communicate broadly. We have a website at www.bostonpublicschools.org. We have developed this website, and it is there, and it is frequently updated with information. That is your best place to get the information where we are getting, unless there is a text or a robocall or letter that we backpack home to families. We understand also that some parents are choosing, and some staff may be choosing to, in an abundance of caution, or maybe because of personal health reasons, to self-quarantine themselves. And so if they do that, we are asking parents to let us know by either a call or a note that they are keeping their child home, and if a staff member is home, that they would call and let us know. These absences will be excused. Again, we'll continue to be sending updates district-wide to staff as well as to families as soon as information is available. And so that's what I have for you so far.
Well, thanks very much, Superintendent. I think it's probably appropriate if members do have any further questions, we can take a brief moment to engage with the superintendent. Are there any further questions right now regarding the COVID-19 preparations? No? Okay.
I neglected to talk also about e-learning, so tonight you're going to hear a lot about academics, and Mark Racine is here, our IT. As you know, a part of the budget recommendation is a one-to-one rollout, but we are looking at e-learning opportunities for our kid. In fact, if we do end up having to close our schools, we are looking for continuity of learning, and Andrea Zayas has been working with the team on that.
Very good, and thank you, Superintendent, and we'll look forward to continuing to monitor this situation through all the media feeds that you've mentioned. So before we move on further in the meeting, I do want to take a moment just to thank the staff here at the King K-8, first for keeping this place in such great order. This is a gorgeous room. This looks like 1930s era Art Deco, and it's a very impressive building, and certainly the murals that are a memorial to Dr. King are very inspiring. I want to thank in particular Principal Coleman Burns and Rochelle Woodard who's our Director of Family and Information Services here at the King School, for getting the school ready for us tonight, and more importantly, just making this school and this building available to us for this meeting. So thank you once again to both of those individuals. So in a moment, the BPS this mic wants me to speed up. The BPS budget team will provide an overview to all of us of the superintendent's FY21 budget recommendation, with a particular focus this evening on central budgets. I want to invite the superintendent to say any, I want to invite her to take a moment to finish her chocolate and then say a few words to open up this presentation. Then we'll hand it over to our budget team and Chief Academic Officer Zayas to move on with the presentation.
Thank you. And thank you again, Mr. Chair. I'm really excited about this budget. This is our, I think, second or third budget hearing, and we had the formal one at school committee. And as you know, the mayor has committed $100 million over 3 years, historic budget, to be able to really move our schools forward. And tonight what you're going to hear about is the academic plan from our Chief Academic Officer, Andrea Zayas, who has been doing just an incredible job of working with teachers on curriculum, on the way that we instruct our students, and on culturally and linguistically sustaining practices. And as I went around and talked with parents, one of the #1 things they said was that they want the curriculum and they want teachers to reflect them and their heritage and their language. And so really excited about the integration that we're seeing with our EL office, our Office of English Language Learners, as well as the integration that's happening for our students with disabilities, so that we can be sure that all students, and when we say all, we mean all students, are getting what they need in the classroom. So I'm very, very excited about her leadership, and I'm excited that this budget presentation is focused on what really matters around getting kids what they need in terms of academics. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Cooter and Mr. Bloom and Ms. Zayas.
Thank you, Superintendent, and I'll ask the committee to join me down in the audience. We're going to have a brief slide presentation on the wall behind us.
We're just waiting a moment. We're having slight technical difficulties with our clicker. Well, good evening, Chairman Lecanto, members of the school committee, and members of the school community. Thank you for joining us this evening at our budget hearing tonight. Tonight, as the chairman mentioned, we will be focusing on central office budgets, particularly how our investments and strategies to support schools with a skilled and aligned central office team. We have a lot of technical information that's available online and that we will be sharing. I'm having all sorts of technical problems. Great. We have a lot of technical information that we're going to be sharing and we've provided online already about a $1.26 billion budget. And as I did at the schools focused hearing a few weeks ago, I'm going to let you know up front what are the 3 things that we want you all to walk away from this hearing, all knowing. The first is that we have received an unprecedented investment in FY21 and a commitment to not only sustain this investment, but to build on it in future years. This is part of the 3-year $100 million is prepared to support an ambitious and multi-year academic strategic plan that will eliminate opportunity gaps and accelerate learning. And the third big takeaway from this evening is that we are making smart investments in central operations that improve the student academic experience and improve BPS customer service. At the first budget hearing, when we presented our budget, we discussed the instructional core, which is the interaction between students, teachers, and content. Our budget is designed around the straightforward premise that there are 3 ways to increase student learning. 1 is to increase the knowledge and skill of teachers, 2 is to change the content, and 3 is to alter the relationship between students and the content teacher. 100% of funding, if new investments in this budget are directed to impacting the student experience through the instructional core. That's $9 million to support students and families through new resources directly on school budgets, $12 million directed to instructional quality and enhancing the educational opportunities for students through the district, throughout the district. And finally, $15 million is about high-quality learning materials and resources. It's about investments in the basics, like cleanliness, and in the modernizing of our technology. Our FY21 budget proposes an $80 million increase to the Boston Public Schools. Of this, $36 million is new investments over and above what we consider our level service costs or maintenance costs. The remaining $44 million represents the increased cost of operations and the cost of implementing salary and benefits cost of the new BTU teacher contract. Here's the truly exciting news, that this is not just a single year investment in BPS, but it is part of the mayor's announced $100 million over 3 years. This means that we have an unprecedented opportunity to discuss this year's budget in the context of increases, not just one-off infusion of cash, but also in the strategic rollout of our vision for the Boston Public Schools. And I've talked about this already, not only as just an unprecedented investment in terms of the total dollar amount, but in the structure that allows us to have a different conversation as a community about how we're going to move forward and how we're going to execute on our strategic plan. And it gives us the fuel to power that strategic plan and raise the bar in quality throughout the city. This year's focus of the budget is investing in the 33 underperforming schools that we've identified as transformation schools. As we've experienced enrollment shifts, we do see some decreases in staffing and budgets at some schools. But as a district, this budget positions us to improve the lowest performing schools and continue to invest in a way that stabilizes enrollment. For example, schools that are adding new grades and programs are adding new positions, but we are working with the schools that are losing enrollment as a result to reduce costs over multiple years. And the net result is we're adding teachers as a district. And so you see here the increase in FTEs highlighted: 64 new teachers in the budget for next year, 94 paraprofessionals, and 126 new school-based and support positions, including psychologists, instructional facilitators, and family liaisons. This is a significant increase in the amount of staff and supports directly to schools. Our full budget is available outside in the foyer and as well as online. You can download it. But if you're going to look at one slide that summarizes the district budget, this is the slide. We've broken the budget into 4 main categories, and then, of course, subcategories that help to explain the budget overall. The first is direct school expenses. These are the budgets that you would see on a school, things that you will see at teaching staff, materials and supplies, enhanced enrichment activities at schools. Those are the line items that you see for each school. The second is what we refer to as school services budgeted centrally. What this means are those are the services that we budget as a central office, but that you don't actually see in the bowling building. You actually see them deployed out to schools. The easiest example of this, of course, is our custodial staff. Those are all budgeted in our facilities department, but the vast majority of our custodians you will find in schools every day, helping to keep our school buildings clean. The next category is central administration. This is the central office staff that you'll find. It's the superintendent's salary, it's my salary, it's the finance team. It's central supports that we help. Part of our central office team, of course, is the academic team, and Andrea Zayas is going to walk us through how that team is aligning to support the academic vision for the district. So these are key supports for our schools. This isn't just about a central bureaucracy. And finally, the last category is the non-BPS student services. And these are services like transportation to charter schools that we provide to all non-BPS students, Boston students in non-BPS settings. I mentioned that 100% of the new investments are directed towards schools. This represents $36 million. Beyond that, 64% of the new funding is directly in schools. 27% of new investments are in school services budgeted centrally, and that overall, 90% of all increased costs, 90% of that $80 million is in schools or school services budgeted centrally. Before I hand it over to Andrea, I just want to note that she is prepared to talk about how the academic team is prepared to support our ambitious multi-year academic strategy. On the next slide, you'll see that we have anchored all of our presentation to our strategic plan. And throughout this budget process, we've tried to show how our strategic plan is aligned directly to this budget. And in past years, we've had a budget where the strategy has been sort of revealed through the budget process or has been incremental. This year, we really started with the superintendent's conversations throughout the fall and visiting every school and having conversations with the community about what we want as a school district, what we want, where we want to go. And we feel that this budget is both a reflection of the strategic plan, but also more importantly, a reflection of the conversations we've been having as a community. And so what you're going to see is throughout the presentation, these anchoring statements from the strategic plan that really shows the alignment with what we're doing. And the superintendent has been clear from the start. All of our schools must be quality now. And so tonight, Andrea is going to walk us through how our central office team is aligning to that. And with that, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Nate, and good evening, school committee, members of the BPS community. My name is Andrea Zayas. I'm the Chief Academic Officer, and I really humbly and proudly serve this community. You're probably hearing me for the first time, maybe the second time, and tonight I'm excited to give you the headlines with some drill down on the detailed work that's happening in my division to address opportunity gaps. And I'm looking forward to time later this spring with the school committee to share the work that the division is doing really broadly, but tonight we're really going to focus on the ways in which we're leveraging the unprecedented budget and the new investments to impact student experience. So the title slide that we saw just maybe 2 slides ago is important because, like Nate said, this is a multi-year academic imperative. So this is the work that we must do over several years. We're beginning it now, and it must be done in a concerted, relentless, committed way in order to get the results that our young people deserve. So we're redefining our expectations about what schools are, what good schools are. That all children deserve schools where they attain not only high levels of academic skills, but also receive the broad range of opportunities, activities, and experiences provided to more affluent students. Our end goal really is ending generational poverty by ensuring that low-income and underrepresented students and children have access to high-quality education that enables them to become critical thinkers, have choices, capitalize on opportunities, and secure continuing economic advancement. So I want to talk you through our big goals that are connected to the strategic plan. With these 3 big division-wide goals in mind, we're focused on moving this complex work forward. That complex work happens across several offices: special education, English learners, academics and professional learning, global programs, health and wellness, and STEM programming. And together, we're rowing in the same direction on these 3 division-wide goals: decreasing the variability in the quality of instruction district-wide by implementing an articulated academic strategy, building teacher capacity to address unfinished teaching and learning and effectively engaging students, and addressing systemic issues through strategic policy change. I'll describe the high-level work we've started and are investing in this coming year on the following slides, goal by goal. So our first goal, to decrease variability in quality of instruction district-wide by implementing an articulated academic strategy. I want to unpack the language in there a little bit. So the thinking around decreasing the variability of quality in instruction, this language reflects our recognition that we have very high quality instruction happening in many of our classrooms in our district. It just isn't evenly distributed. It's not guaranteed that every classroom has high quality instruction happening every day. Thus, we need to provide one of the resources that research tells us makes the biggest difference: high quality instructional materials in all of our classrooms, be they classrooms that serve students that have IEPs or English learners, all classrooms. All means all grades, all subjects. And this year we're starting with a literacy adoption process with the $2.5 million investment that Nate described a little while ago. So on this blue slide, you'll see this multi-year investment that's aligned with the highest expectations. Making sure that our students meet this demand, we're beginning with research-based strategies in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. We're engaged in a process where there are 3 committees: a review committee, a selection committee, and an implementation team that's involving over 100 educators across the district. If anyone is in the audience tonight or listening or viewing later on BNN and you'd like to be part of that process, we really welcome you. Please email me, azayas@bostonpublicschools.org. We'd love to have you be part of the process. This multi-year rollout recognizes that adopting a new curriculum isn't only about new materials in a classroom. It's not only about procuring new materials, it's ensuring that those materials are, that we have the right kinds of training, pedagogical training, that we have the right kinds of training in partnership with the publishing partners, and that we have the right kinds of support and ongoing coaching in classrooms at our school buildings every day, every week, in an ongoing way across the year to ensure that those materials are making the impact and shifting student experience. Our second goal, build teacher capacity to address unfinished teaching and learning and effectively engage students. So again, want to unpack the language in this goal a little bit. So building teacher capacity. Again, Boston is really fortunate to have so many excellent educators. In my 20 months here, I've been so impressed to meet so many remarkable teachers, so many board-certified teachers. Our dedicated teachers and school-based staff work tirelessly for our kids. And to quote the great Maya Angelou, when we know better, we do better. So it's incumbent upon us as the school district to ensure that we have quality systems in place to support teacher learning and growth. The new high-quality instructional materials call on us to teach in a different way, to up our game in terms of pedagogy and data-driven instruction. And so we are developing systems that are not only district run, but really centering teachers in peer learning and peer learning systems in order to provide teachers with what they need right in their classrooms during common planning times. So the language around unfinished teaching and learning. So we're challenging ourselves to address deficit-based language that demonstrates a belief that our students cannot. Language like our students are struggling or our students that are failing. So we're challenging ourselves to use language like we have unfinished learning or unfinished teaching. Our belief is that all of our students, including students with disabilities, low-income students, Black and brown students, and English learners, can learn at the highest levels. And we know that because it's true in so many places. We know that throughout history, those communities have led developments in mathematics, in STEM, etc. So we say unfinished teaching, because we can then center the responsibility on the adults, on us at central office, on teachers, on leaders, to ensure that students have everything that they need in order to learn the material and to ensure that they're engaging them in really effective ways. So in the next year, we're going to ask teachers to reflect on their practice in really deep ways. We're going to provide protocols for instructional coaches to support them in doing that work during common planning, during workshops, during PD, hosted and sponsored by the district, by the academics team, by OEL, by special education, and also really locally focused at their school building through their instructional coaches and with their school leaders. This work will be focused around implementation of the new curriculum and to teach in new and in more inclusive ways. In some ways, it will also be teaching each other best practices, sharing those best practices and spreading them across the district. So we're preparing to support this change through team-based professional learning, higher quality instructional materials that are culturally and linguistically sustaining and relevant, frequent coaching, and consistent feedback. We're also investing in school leadership development, including investments in our recruitment and pipeline efforts. So I talked about common planning time a couple of times, specifically in our transformation schools. We're increasing access to art, music, and physical education classes by providing additional specialists. Obviously, that has a remarkable impact on young people's experience at school every day when they have access to those enriching experiences. In addition to that, that time that young people are spending with that specialist frees their classroom teacher up to do deep learning, to do the intellectual preparation that they need to do, to study the text, to plan for those text-dependent questions, to take the assessment together and backward plan so that they're really ready to not only engage students with the highest expectations, but to ensure that they've meticulously planned in a way that addresses the needs of the diverse learners that are in front of them every single day. And then finally, our third goal is to address systemic issues through strategic policy change. So this spring, we're going to be bringing you a recommendation to adopt the Mass Core course of study as our district graduation requirement. We're looking at a grading policy reform that will move toward mastery or competency-based grading, as well as report card and transcripting reform to ensure that what our students are learning is really adequately reflected in the documents that go with them to their to high school and beyond. Right? And with that, I'm both looking forward to your questions, and I'll hand it over to David Bloom.
Good evening, everyone. The focus of my section of the presentation is about how we are improving the quality and access of our central office departments. One of the key features of the strategic plan draft that the superintendent has put together is feedback from the community and being responsive to our stakeholders of the district. In the section of the plan talking about items that we've heard from stakeholders, some of the items mentioned most frequently had to do with our central office and the services that we are providing to schools, from facilities to transportation to technology and more. So to do that, our first investment is a focus on improving the quality of the facilities that our students are learning in, so that they are able to really focus on their academic achievement. The main part of this investment is around an investment in custodial services and support, making sure that students are in clean and well taken care of buildings. In addition, as we are thinking about our capital budget that will be proposed a little bit later on in the spring, we're thinking about investments in the physical facilities as well as the way they are maintained, including upgrades to drinking fountains and bathrooms and things like that. In addition, as the superintendent mentioned earlier, we are investing in a massive purchase of Chromebooks for students. This includes one-to-one computing in grades 7 through 12, and then a slightly different ratio in grades K through 6 that still gives all students access to technology as a part of their instructional day. This will allow us to take the work of thinking about student devices out of the hands of schools, give them one less thing to worry about, and really focus on making sure that students have that appropriate access to technology that will help them further their education. So then there are some additional investments that really help us think about how are we improving what we are doing now in central office operations, and really also thinking about improving the experience of BPS stakeholders as they engage with central office, be it through a welcome center or through a school office. As we look at this in the strategic plan, the key language there is around upholding a standard of organizational effectiveness, right? That people's experience with BPS is a positive experience as you're engaging with the system. One of the first ways many people interact with our system, if they're coming to work for us, is through the Office of Human Capital. And so one of our investments in this cycle is a focus in the Office of Human Capital around employee services at the full range of trajectory of employees. So both investment in employee services for existing employees, working on things that may not be very sort of sexy items, but are the bread and butter of what we do as a district, right? Making sure employees are paid on time, that they're getting any pay changes answered, that they're having easy experience when they have to go out on leave or have a child. Then also at the bookends of it, it focused on intentional recruitment and retention, improving the diversity of our workforce by having a real focus on the recruitment and retention of Latinx, Asian, and Black teachers, leaders, and central office staff. And finally, some additional thoughtfulness around teachers in suitable professional capacity. And to expand a little bit further on suitable professional capacity, this is educators who have been excessed from their building for one reason or another at the end of the previous school year, who by the time the next year starts have not found a new position in the building. In that case, permanent educators are placed in a position of suitable professional capacity, working under their license with children, but not in a full-time it is full-time, but not in an ongoing position. As we've been thinking about the suitable professional capacity pool over time, our goal, as always, is to minimize that pool, not from a cost perspective, though that helps, but more from the position of really getting those excellent educators we have in our system in front of children. As you can see on this slide, every year there are hundreds of teachers who are transitioning between schools, anywhere from 250 to 500 teachers depending upon the year who have been excessed from their position for a variety of reasons. By the time we get to August, the number of teachers without a position has significantly decreased. These teachers who are left at the end of that process are placed in a position of suitable professional capacity to start the year, but what we find is that number continues to fall over the course of the year. And so that pretty consistently, by the end of the year, there are only sort of 50 or so teachers left in a position of suitable professional capacity. As I mentioned, over the course of the year, there's a number of ways where that teachers leave the suitable professional capacity pool. They're often hired into a position that becomes available over the course of the year, either right at the beginning of the year, if there's an unexpected vacancy, or as we add positions to deal with unexpected student demand. Teachers do choose to resign or take a voluntary severance agreement. Teachers retire. And then some teachers end up going out on a leave of absence. But as you can see, by June, we tend to end up with somewhere between 45 and 60 people who have maintained in a position of suitable professional capacity over the course of the whole year. Next year, we have decreased our proposed spending on teachers in suitable professional capacity. Once again, this is not by eliminating those teachers, but by having a real focus on ensuring that excess teachers are finding an appropriate placement in a school in a permanent position. Another large area of spending that we discuss further and we think about when we're thinking about our customer experience as a district is our transportation department. As I'm sure everyone in the audience and watching at home is familiar with, our transportation spending has increased over time, and it represents an investment in access and equity. As a district, we invest in transportation as a part of our student assignment system to try and provide more equitable access to high-quality seats for all students. The vast majority of our spending in transportation is for operating yellow buses, but we also spend a substantial amount of money on a variety of other items. T-passes for students in grades 7 through 12, bus monitors, temporary transportation for students in transition, buying the actual buses, and so on. As you can see from this example from the UMANA, our schools draw from all over the city. As we talk about our assignment plan and impact on transportation, we see a significant number of our schools are serving students from more than 10 zip codes in Boston. I know the dots may be fairly small from far away, but the UMANA is serving students from as far away as Hyde Park or Alston Brighton who are going to East Boston every day. Some of this has to do with allowing citywide access to certain programs, such as dual language at the UMANA, and some of it has to do with other features of the transitions of the students in our school and preserving access to the school that they've originally been enrolled in. At the end of this, as we look into that 70% of our budget that's on yellow bus service, what we see is that the costs of serving students vary significantly by the type of placement they're in. Yellow bus service for students on corner stops actually only represents about 1/3 of the students and about 1/3 of the cost of the system. Students receiving door-to-door transportation are significantly more expensive as a system because, as you can imagine, the bus drives right up to their door and is only picking up one student or two at a time. The other features of this system that we don't necessarily always talk about is about 20% of our yellow bus costs are for transporting students who do not attend BPS schools. The Boston Public Schools is the transportation provider for all students of Boston, regardless of whether or not they're attending a BPS school. So this includes students in charter schools, private schools, parochial schools, and students who are in Boston but who are attending a out-of-district placement for sometimes special education or vocational education services. One of the things that we have started last year and are excited to be continuing this year is a new method of exploring the Boston Public Schools budget. For those of you who sometimes struggle, as I do, to say, how do you break down $1.4 billion into meaningful and understandable chunks of spending? What we've tried to do with this website at bostonpublicschools.org/explore budget is give you an interactive tool that breaks down our $1.4 billion into activities that are manageable to understand. So we do that in a variety of different ways. First, we do it by breaking down central office spending. This includes both central office in its pure form, but also school services budgeted centrally by activity. So you can click in on operations, click in on facilities, and then look at the different types of custodial supports we offer, and so on for every division of the organization. We also then go school by school to show you the school budget, but also the roll-on impact of central office at schools. You can look at this both totals by school, dollar per pupil by school, and then at each individual school by school-based activities to build up a greater understanding of what is it that makes those real school costs vary. Could be the number of students with disabilities, the number of English learners, or so on. Finally, as you can see on this slide, we're about 2/3 of the way through our budget season this year. There is another budget hearing before the school committee meeting next Wednesday from 5 to 6, and there will then be the full school committee meeting after. And the vote for the BPS budget is Wednesday, March 25th. We will be presenting a revised budget to the school committee next Wednesday before their vote a week later. Also, tomorrow from 4 to 6, there's going to be a student town hall. Apologies for the omission from the calendar. It's at the Bowling Building. We encourage, if you know any students who'd be interested in attending, to come join. This will be a student voice-led session. Adult support is welcomed as an observers, but it's a student voice. The focus is on student voice. With that, we'll turn it back to the school committee for questions and feedback.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ms. Zayas, Mr. Cooter, and Mr. Bloom for that presentation and for giving us a little bit more insight on the this year's FY21 budget presentation. We're going to open it up to the members for discussion in just a moment, but before we get to that, we're going to have public comment. I believe we only have 4 speakers this evening, so I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Lecanto. The public comment period is an opportunity for parents, students, and other concerned parties to make brief presentations to the school committee on pertinent school issues. Questions on specific school matters are not answered at this time, but are referred to the superintendent for a later response. Questions on specific policy matters are not answered at this time, but may be the subject of later discussion by the committee. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak, and I'll remind you when you have 30 seconds remaining. Those who require interpretation services will receive an additional 2 minutes. Written testimony is appreciated and encouraged. Please state your name and affiliation before you begin. TV cameras will only record speakers who face the committee. We have 4 speakers this evening, and we'll begin with Molly Warner, followed by Lina Higgins and Linda Freeman.
Good evening. My name is Molly Warner, and I am a proud K-1 parent of the Mather School in Dorchester, the nation's first public elementary school. This is my first year as a BPS parent, and I've not been intimate with BPS for long, but I've learned a lot in the past few months by being an active member of the school site council at our school. Amidst our meetings, I've learned about weighted student funding and have had the opportunity to comment and vote on our school's budget for fiscal year 21, and had some challenging decisions on which types of programs we will have to be not choosing for our next school year. In this lovely document you guys have provided tonight, I've read about the weighted student funding, and it says, in Boston, we believe giving families a voice where their students attend schools is important, and this family choice is only possible by allowing dollars to follow students, or the weighted student funding. And it encourages competition and encourages each school to entice more students to attend. And as a parent, I appreciate that choice, and I appreciate competition. It challenges each school to be the best they can be. But unchecked, this competition is not healthy. It's not equitable, and when it comes to the education of the children in my neighborhood, I'm seeing that play out in our school. And that which narrowly missed being, I think you're referring to them as the innovation schools. We were just above the cutoff of that 33 schools. Without enough students, there's a decreasing in funding each year, and there has been a decrease for the past 3 years at the Mather. With fewer funds, there are fewer specials and programs to attract new families, and fewer support programs that encourage students to come back every day to school. With shifting district priorities as well, about 6th grade, the Mather is a school that only goes to 5th grade, and that further inhibits our ability to attract families. In that same document, you reference a soft landing for schools that are experiencing a decline in enrollment to their budget. Our administration applied for that soft landing. I was told that these funds were aimed to maintain our community field coordinator position, or to maintain her as a full-time FTE.
20 seconds.
And I learned that last week that application was declined for the soft landing. Your same document describes that there's a dedicated reserve specifically to support lower performing schools with enrollment declines. And so tonight I urge the school committee to stay true to its statements and use a portion of this dedicated reserve to stabilizing the Mather School. As you guys refer often, you're asking for quality now, and we are asking for that at the Mather too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lina Higgins, and she'll be followed by Linda Freeman and Ann Malone.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is actually Lynn Higgins.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay, it's my handwriting.
Thank you.
I'm a parent at the Mather as well. I have been there, I'm a parent advocate for the Mather. I've been there 11 years. And our motto at the Mather is the first and the finest. It's on all of our t-shirts, it's on all of our sweatshirts. So basically, what does that mean? The first? We are the first public elementary school funded in the country. This fall, we turned 381 years old. That's pretty amazing. In my opinion, we should be the flagship of all BPS schools. As far as being the finest, I'm up here tonight to ask you for some help with that. In the fall of the 2021 school year, we're going to face some serious budget cuts that's going to impact our specialties programs, our enrichment programs, and of course, our important teachers. It's really not fair for our principal to have to choose her staff over enriching the minds of our young achievers at our school. So what do these budget cuts look like at our school? Our library, which is one of our best specialties we have, are being cut down to only 2 days a week. 2 days a week to serve 500 kids. I don't see how that's going to work at all. I know BPS talks about equity for all and literacy for all. I don't really see how that is equitable for any of the students at the Mather. Some of our programs, enrichment programs that are being cut are our Playworks program. We're losing a Ballet Rocks program, and we're losing our Cantata Singers program due to these budget cuts. Those are all empowering enrichment programs for our young achievers. It gives them strength, it gives them confidence, which they absolutely need at this young age. So as a parent, when I make school choice, when I have to pick schools, I don't just look at academic achievements for every school. I look at what the schools offer to keep my child well-rounded. The Mather cannot compete with your new K-6 schools. The Mather cannot compete with the existing K-8 schools. But how we can compete is by offering some of the best programming and teaching that the district has to offer. We've been doing this for a really long time, and we're really good at it. So I beg you guys, please look at your reserves. See if you can allot some more money to our school, because we're already the first. We want to stay the finest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Linda Freeman, and she'll be followed by Ann Malone and John Mudd.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to voice and express. I have a big concern about our coordinators of special education and where do they stand in forthcoming after this. Generally, from what I understand, they're a point person for our families and scheduling IEP meetings, annual reviews, etc. If you pull the codes out, or as what they've done years ago of giving them more than 2 to 3 schools as a cluster, and we've also had an increase of students with disabilities, ELL, over the years. That's a different capacity than many years ago as to what it is now. It is important to have our coordinators of special education. They've changed the title from ETL to ETFs and back and forth. If you think that role is not important in the schools, it is vital as well. Please reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Ann Malone, and she'll be followed by John Mudd.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you, everyone who already gave testimony. I want to support the comments that have come before me. I'm Ann Malone, a BPS parent of 15 years now. One son went through kindergarten through 12th grade, and he had special needs on the autism spectrum, and we had some really rough periods, but BPS was mostly there in really helpful ways, so I just wanted to share that's part of my perspective in this journey. And my 9th grader is currently at Boston Latin School, and I'm very active with the school community and also the citywide parent council, and have been trying to learn about the other parts of the system, the Opportunity Achievement Gap Task Force. I've been going to their last 6 months of meetings, and I really am heartened, especially with the new superintendent's leadership and the community's involvement, that we can get some really important work done, but I'm very upset about the inequities that still exist, like the Mather School, that they're having to spend so much time and effort to keep their librarian is crazy, you know? And the Timilty School, like the Opportunity Achievement Gap Task Force, the teacher that sits as the teacher rep on that has been crying out for help, that they're losing like 8 teacher positions or something at the Timilty, and I know from knowing parents in that community that the school's, I think, having a really rough time. And I know it's one of the transition schools or whatever the phrase is for those 33 schools getting extra money, but you shouldn't take away like classroom teachers to give and then give family supports. You know, give more, don't take some away and give something else. So I just wanted to lift up the concerns of the Timilty. And then also, if we're all sincerely committed to equity, and I'm also really active with Surge Boston, showing up for racial justice, trying to learn how to be in community with others as an effective anti-racist. And I think, you know, racism has such a deep, horrid legacy, and it has a current today impact. It's still happening. And the BEJA pledge, the Boston Education Justice Alliance pledge, the 3 sections for curriculum, for facilities, for staffing, we should all be like running to endorse that. The school committee members, the superintendent, I think, you know, Dr. Caselius, you've given your verbal support, but I think we should get on record as supporting that. I also feel like the equity issue, my son's school, Boston Latin School, shouldn't be allowed to be sitting on $60 million in a private foundation. So I would like to, I was going to go to the meeting tonight, but it got canceled where that was going to be discussed. And I would like to sort of be part of a constructive, collaborative voice on how do we make equity in this fundraising and distribution of fundraising. And then the very last thing, let's go for electric school buses to save the climate.
Thank you, Ms. Malone.
Thank you, Ms. Malone. Our next speaker is John Mudd.
Good evening. I think all of you know I've been very excited to hear the multi-year focus on academics and particularly on professional development. I think that's crucial in terms of realizing the goals we all have of eliminating opportunity and achievement gaps. I have 3 kind of questions, comments. One, I would hope that we could look on professional development at the whole package, you know, and use the new focus on, I guess, 2.5 million investment in literacy training as a way in to look at how we're spending throughout the system, you know, both other central departments and particularly how we're using, I assume we still have the 18 hours at the school level. How are we pulling all of those together in one overall professional development package or strategy? Secondly, I also hope that as part of this academic approach, there will be new strategies around students with disabilities and English learners. The focus on 33 schools is crucial, but you all know, and I know, those schools have a disproportionate number of students with disabilities and English learners. If we don't address how to improve those fast, we are not going to succeed in improving those schools, much less the system as a whole. Finally, sort of a plea that I totally support the intentional focus on new recruitment and retention of teachers and race as a criterion, blacks, Latinos, Asians, and so on. We're way behind. I have said repeatedly to this group, I would hope you could also include language. I think we have as big a gap in language as we do in race, and if we're going to be serious about adapting culturally and linguistically, we have to have teachers with some capacity there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mudd.
Thank you. Mr. Locondo, that concludes our speakers for public comment.
Well, thank you, Ms. Sullivan, and thank you once again to everyone who's spoken tonight, especially our parents that have come out from a number of our schools this evening. We hear your testimony, and we take this into consideration as we move through every budget cycle, and we move towards our votes that will occur on March 25th. I want to move to our committee now for questions and discussion. We'll open, and we will start with Ms. Robinson down at the end and move right down the table.
Thank you so much again for your presentation. I have two questions. I'm trying to understand the SPC issue. Where do we have the data about why people are accessed? What are the demographics and the reasons for that happening, and why they aren't able to get new jobs? I hear us on one side, again, folks are leaving and then we're trying to recruit, and the question is where is the overlap, and how do you help schools think about who they're accessing and why and what they need? I mean, we keep hearing schools talking about this juggle amongst trying to create a program that works for their school.
Yeah. So I'm sure our Office of Human Capital could come back and give you way more details about the super professional capacity pool than I could give you tonight. But what I can say is that the significant majority of teachers who are accessed and are looking for positions every year do find a position, and also that the majority of teachers that are initially placed in the suitable professional capacity pool are either getting a job in the current year and are in the pool for less than a year, or are finding a job for the next year and so are only in that position for 1 year as they are transitioning from one school to another. It's often an opportunity for them to build a relationship with a new school community and to get out of their comfort zone a little bit about, in some cases, what place or school they've been used to teaching at. There are some rare instances where we have teachers in certain job types that we don't see a lot of positions for anymore. And in those cases, our Office of Human Capital is working with those teachers in their suitable professional capacity year to help them gain the skills in a new area so they can apply their teaching pedagogy to maybe a slightly different type of class than the one they taught before, but still in the Boston Public Schools. And then the Office of Human Capital, I'm sure, will be able to come back and present more about the different racial, ethnic, language, age breakdown of teachers in the suitable professional capacity pool.
I think I would like to see that data. The other one is, thank you for the list of soft landings that you provided. Can you also provide us the list of people that were denied and the reasons that they were denied soft landings?
Sure. I think to quote John McDonough, a part of the tricky thing about all of the soft landings is we have just a finite pool of money. And so no soft landing was denied for it being an idea that would be bad for students. What we look at is what is the budget change? Is that budget change affecting direct classrooms that are being closed and the school can manage? Or are they affecting those additional supports that are provided school-wide that means children are really missing out? And then how severe is the change and cut, and sort of how far down the pool can we go? But we can certainly provide that information about it.
Yeah, the only thing I'll just add is I think in any given year we're trying to evaluate the best approach to respond to soft landings. This year, one of the things we focused on was making fewer investments that were more targeted to support schools that were experiencing the biggest transitions. And so I think you're going to see a long list of schools that applied. I think part of also, and this is part of the excitement of $100 million in 3 years, is that I think we had more schools apply or reach out to us about new things that they're hoping to do as a way to start the conversation possibly for future years. And we want to encourage to get the full picture of what's happening, but we're trying to evaluate what is the most sort of targeted way that we can make those soft landings. So the schools that you have on the list, which will also be posted online, for the public afterwards is the list of schools that received it. You're going to see those are the schools that are experiencing the biggest transition in terms of total enrollment decline and other hardships that we are trying to compensate for.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. We'll move on to Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a bit more than 2 questions. It's what happens when I miss the last budget hearing, so buckle up. Ms. Zayas, first of all, starting with you, thank you for your presentation, and I'm really interested in some of the things you talked about in Goal 1, decreased variability and quality of instructional district-wide, as well as a fundamental shift in the way we approach instructional literacy. So when you talk about a multi-year rollover of instructional materials, could you talk a little bit more about how you're going to be doing that? How are you choosing? What is the literacy program that we're doing? Are schools having a choice of school programs? Is it going to be just one district-wide? Is it transformational schools first? Help me out with a little bit on that, please.
Yeah, it's like the million-dollar question, right? Are we all going to be using the same curriculum? How are we doing it? So first, we're starting with the 34 transformation schools.
Okay.
These schools will be making a common commitment to a common approach and a common curriculum. We are going through the process right now of selecting that curriculum, and all of the school leaders and many of their teachers are involved in the process. Other school leaders that are not part of those 34 have already asked, can we participate in that? We'd like to be part of the selection process because we want to be part of what our colleagues are doing and want to go along and row together and really be moving in the same direction together. So that's really promising. In terms of the process, there are a couple of important pieces of research that we're grounding this work in. First, I want to talk a little bit about ed reports. So ed reports, I'm going to encourage all of us to get familiar with edreports.org. It is they provide reports that help us to evaluate educational materials because high quality materials are really important for all the reasons that we talked about before. They provide hundreds of educator-reviewed reports for many different types of programs, ELA, math, and we're anxiously awaiting their science reports this spring. They provide reports that let you know to what extent a curriculum is rigorous based on a set of criteria that's used across the board, to what extent is the curriculum aligned to the standards, to what extent is it accessible to teachers, to what extent does it support English learners and students with disabilities. Above and beyond ed reports, we then go, so they rate them, yellow, red, green, right? So
It's like a consumer reports?
It's like a consumer reports, very well put. So we're looking for all greens on the ed reports. It's got to meet all of the ed reports minimum criteria. High bar, actually, that they set. We're only considering those, that's our first cut. If it's not all green on ed reports, it's not worthy of us reviewing any further. The next cut is Curate, which stands for Curriculum Rated by Teachers, and that's DESE's tool that's been developed over the last several years. Many of our BPS educators have participated in DESE's process to actually rate curriculum as well. So if you go to DESE's Curate website, you'll see another version, right, of a similar type of process that they went through to rate curricular programs. And that's our next cut. DESE's lens is a little bit sharper around equity, as expected, right? And it also takes a sharp look at, and takes a clear look at the Massachusetts frameworks. In large part, the Common Core standards and the Massachusetts frameworks, there's a lot of overlap there, but there are some distinguishing features. So DESE's tool then gives us an opportunity to look really clearly, how is that national report really specific to Massachusetts and then to what Boston needs. So we look at those two reports, and then we also have a number of other tools that we'll be using in our selection and review and implementation teams to ensure cultural and linguistic proficiency, cultural and linguistic relevance. We are looking at, we're using the English Learner Success Forum's criteria for accessibility for English learners. We're also ensuring that this literacy program that we select has components that are going to be easily used and are high quality for our English as a second language classrooms. And a little bit more about process, if I may, if I'm not being too long-winded. We've already brought together a team of about 35 people who are committed to seeing this process through from beginning to end, right? These folks are school leaders, teachers, central office staff, coaches, and we have some school committee membership as well. Some partners are at the table, higher ed partners. That group of folks is developing along the lines of ed reports and curate the criteria that we'll be using to ultimately select the program. So we don't have any foregone conclusions about what this program is going to be. It's the process itself will yield what the program will be by the end of April, so that we have just enough time to procure very, very quickly and get materials in hands for this summer.
So, for example, in K-8, thank you for that description. In K-8 literacy, how many different programs are we using right now across the district, would you estimate?
Boy, how many classrooms do we have?
True.
We have a wide variety. There are some, I'd say, philosophical clusters, right? There are folks that sort of like believe a particular thing and then use a particular program. There are certainly practices that are shared across individual teachers. I really haven't come across, and I'm constantly searching, right, for a whole school doing one program. We have such a wide variety.
Even within schools?
Even within schools. Our most recent purchase of materials was expeditionary learning in our elementary literacy. Right at the beginning of expeditionary learning becoming available. And there are some gaps with that curriculum. You can take a look at it on Ed Reports and see how it's rated. The second version of it, which we didn't adopt, is higher rated than the first edition. The first edition, I know of teachers that are listening, it's missing writing. Teachers are often making things or creating things or finding things to fill in the gaps. So we're hoping that with this adoption, we're giving teachers a base, a really robust base to start from, and then go through really thorough planning processes to be able to create the materials and the learning experiences that their diverse students.
So this is starting with literacy.
Right.
Do you anticipate this process rolling to other academic subjects as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think the idea is that we're building the habit of deep investment and of professional learning in this way, starting with literacy. We need to move very quickly to science. We have some dollars set aside for science, and like I said, Ed Reports is coming out with their consumer reports for science materials elementary this spring. So as soon as they are ready to go with their reports, we can begin on our science adoption as well. Math will probably be sometime later in the future. I think maybe next year. I think we'll have to look to see where we are and do a deep analysis of needs there and consult with teachers and leaders and see where we are in that timeline.
So I don't want to underestimate the lift in front of you in the coming year.
Yeah.
Right? This is a fundamental shift from schools choosing programs, and often, as you say, teachers within schools choosing programs.
Yeah.
To more of a district-led initiative. And I recognize starting with the 34 schools, getting traction, and then building from there. So I just don't want to underestimate the lift in front of you on this. I'm sure you're aware of it, but there are times that it's important to state this out.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's definitely a sea change, and we're so slow and steady, right? My colleague who you all met at the last budget hearing often says, change moves at the pace of trust. So what we're expecting will happen as teachers are actually selecting this program is that we will be able to prove that moving in this direction and working together helps us to go farther, helps our students to go farther.
Is this a research-based decision?
In terms of the program?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Is there research to show that having a centralized curriculum approach is more beneficial for a district than having a range of options for individual schools to decide?
I think that depends on the review. So a lot of districts will have multiple, they'll say, okay, you can choose from these 3 or these 5, and they've all been aligned to standards, and you can choose, so they give them choices within a constrained selection process, because then they've been reviewed for bias, they've been reviewed for CLSP, they've been reviewed for age appropriateness and the progression of learning that's expected, all of those things. I think I wanted to just mention here in Boston that similar to the library issue at the Mather, schools have autonomies around the decision-making. Similarly, they have autonomies around the decision-making for curriculum. And even as schools, whole schools sometimes don't choose the curriculum as Isaias was sharing. Teachers will choose the materials. And so what we want to be able to assure is that you'll have the same and similar expectation, regardless of what classroom you're in, that you will align to the Massachusetts standards, so that when we assess students, we can be assured that students are being assessed on what is expected for kids to be able to know and do to not only earn a diploma, but to actually succeed in college. And so I think that that's the process that the academic team is putting together now to assure that the materials are aligned. And the reason that we're able to do it in those 34 schools is because we're compelling them to do it because they're in the lowest 10% of schools. Outside of that process, I think we would need policy shift for me to be able to require schools to do it because they have certain autonomies in their governance packages.
Okay. I'm just trying to understand. Thank you for that, Superintendent. And having spoken with you extensively, I know your sense of frustration you're not frustrated at the autonomy we have. You're frustrated that we don't have the results that we should have. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I want to make sure I understand it right. Well, earned autonomy, but if you have autonomy, it's great to have autonomy if our students are doing well. But you are genuinely and legitimately concerned about the results this district has have, and you want to improve it. So you're making some changes. So is the shift in the curriculum more because research shows us that a centralized curriculum is better for a district, or is it because of, and both are very legitimate, by the way, and I support both, I'm just trying to understand it, or is it more concern of the bottom line is the end results are not what we need them to be, and so we need a fresher approach?
Well, I think it's both. Okay. I think that you absolutely need to get better results, and the way to get better results is to ensure that what students are actually tested on, they're taught. That's number one. Yep. And so I'm trying to get a handle on with the academic team on ensuring that students are being taught the material that we as a state have said is important for them to be able to know in order for them to be successful in life. Because there's a core body of knowledge that students need to know. Outside of that, we have the issue of autonomy and whether a centralized or decentralized curriculum is best. I have no problem if people are picking things. Matter of fact, I've asked the Chief Academic Officer to work with the team to review materials that teachers would like to have in courses for our mass core that are, it's called a rigorous course waiver, because we have alternative schools, we have career and technical education schools, we have exam schools. who offer courses, and they've been offering them for years, and they're very rigorous courses, or maybe an international baccalaureate course or advanced placement course. We just want to make sure that those courses go through a review for CLSP, and that those courses go through a review for standards alignment. And once we give it a quality check, you know, just teach what you want, you know, as long as it's aligned.
Great, thank you. That was very helpful to me, so thank you for saying that. I will say I do know, in talking with some of our peers nationally, it is a pendulum between autonomy and more centralized approach, and the pendulum does nationally seem to be swinging back more towards a more centralized approach. So your thinking is certainly logical to me. Mr. Chair, in the interest of time, I had a number of questions on another, since this is a central budget issue, I would have expected to see a couple of slides on, separate from this FTE breakout, on, you know, what are we spending on food service, what are we spending on technology, what are we spending on facilities, the maintenance piece, not build BPS, partnerships, and could I simply put in that request, are we going to have a budget discussion at the next school committee meeting, which is next Wednesday?
Next Wednesday, there's a 5 o'clock budget hearing followed by
but then in the regular meeting, is there a budget presentation?
There is not, but I think we can schedule something for the 5 o'clock hearing.
Okay, so if we could get some more breakout of some of the central things. For example, I'm interested with the changes at next year. Is it next year we're going to 100% of the schools will have My Way cafes? Is it next school year? I think it's next school year, isn't it?
I don't think it's next school year, and there's also, I know some schools where we're having some space constraints to be able to get them to My Way Cafe.
Yep.
But I could find out and get the full plan there. Okay. I would just note that the My Way Cafe spending is a capital investment, so it wouldn't be part of the...
That I recognize, but it does have implications for the FTEs. So I'm interested in what the food service spending is. I'm interested in, you know, has the My Way resulted in some shifts in that? Is it budgeted to be a loss this year? Are we getting close to break even, et cetera? So I'd love to see a breakout on that. I'd love to see a breakout on technology spending, particularly as the superintendent mentioned in her opening comments, that trying to move more towards some online education. And obviously that's going to be an issue in the next couple of weeks. By the way, as we've been sitting here, I get a notice that several more universities are now shifting to online and asking students to move out, so the trend is continuing. Food service, technology, facilities, more of a breakout on that, please, the facility spending, separate from the build BPS piece. What are we putting back into our buildings? And two other things that, and then I'll stop, Mr. Chair. Not sure if they were talked about in the schools-based portion last week, but I was not able to be, or several weeks ago that I was not able to be at. So I'm interested in is what the budget is on partnerships and opportunity index. And also how are we separately budgeting for alternative ed and how are we discussing that this year? And I'm not sure, Superintendent, if you wanted to talk about the alt ed piece. Or if you wanted to have that conversation at the next meeting.
Yes, I was writing down things for the capital conversation. So we have a capital improvement request into the city. Yep. I know that the mayor's already committed to doing bathrooms, doing water, radiator covers, entryways, those things, windows, lighting. So we have a number of those, and we'd be glad to bring that forward as well about the facility improvements that we'll be doing. I think the biggest things over there are the bathrooms and the water that the mayor has committed already to. As for the other piece, what was it?
About the partnerships, overall what our spending is on partnerships, and how much is being put in the opportunity index and how much is separate from that.
And we can certainly make sure we bring that back to with partnerships. Recently, we did an assessment of partnerships too, school by schools, in our engagement office. So I think that's really great information to see which schools have what partners. Yeah. And so we'd be glad to share that as well.
Great.
Because we're working on the equity of partnerships, the equity of fundraising, and making sure that there's more equity across all of our schools and how we're going to do that. And we'll have further information on that, hopefully at the next meeting or the meeting after.
And then lastly, the question about alternative ed.
Well, Mr. O'Neill, before the superintendent goes on, just an added note on partnerships. This is obviously something that the vice chair and Dr. Coleman have been very interested in. We've had talks at some of our retreats about possibly forming a partnership subcommittee, task force, or perhaps working with the superintendent to establish a working group under her purview. And so I think we'll continue to have those conversations as we move into a planning phase once we get past the budget, and that might further assist some of the and provide support for some of the conversations that are upcoming.
Great. I think the area is so ripe to improve in that, and there's a lot of excitement about the work that the superintendent is doing now, so I think a lot of people are poised to help, but they need the direction on how to help.
We're really excited about the high school redesign that we're doing, and we just finished an alternative education evaluation. And so as I bring forward the recommendations around Build PPS and around our high schools and what we're going to be doing with high school redesign, alternative schools will also be with that, so we'll be coming back to you around with that piece.
Okay.
How that will direct what happens then with the budget.
It goes without saying, you know a number of school committee members are keenly interested in that, and in the belief that we have to have a strong and robust alternative ed system that consists of both our schools and partners that have worked with us on that. So we look forward to your thoughts on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, great, and thank you again, Mr. O'Neill, for your suggestions on follow-up topics for next week. I'm sure our budget folks can put something together to help address that at the outset of the hearing. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to all the folks that came out to testify and talk. We really appreciate you coming out. I know it's a school night and there's a lot of urgent issues happening in our community, so thank you. I wanted to just say the things that I was pleased about, which were around the custodian piece, because we hear often from our young people, and it really does speak about how we value our young people when it comes down to, basic things like the bathroom. So I really appreciate that. And I loved seeing the competency-based grading and the expanding technology and the enrichment. I wanted to say around the enrichment pieces that I also hope, I understand you're putting some pieces, 64 positions in the budget, that there also are external partners that can offer some of these pieces. And so I think, again, going back to the partnership piece of how we are leveraging, because 64 is, it's not a huge number. It's obviously a nice increase, but it's not, nearly enough of what we need in terms of getting every young person to have, art and music, et cetera. So there's lots of partners who also have space, and just looking strategically at what the different things that they can bring to the table. I wanted to ask a few questions. And one more comment was in this slide deck, in the vision, mission of the strategic plan draft, I would like to see not just the culturally, but also the linguistic piece, because I think that's really important. And going to Mr. Mudd's point that I completely agree, it's great to have, staff that are going to be dedicated to hiring a more diverse pool, but we should also look at language and what we are missing. And it goes without saying, I'm going to say it anyway, but it's great to have a staff person, but really it's everyone's responsibility and not just that one person, because I think we all need to be recruiting a diverse pool, and so I don't want it to be held under that one person who's going to be held to the fire, because it's the whole office, it's the whole team, it's the whole district, it's all of us, up here. I know I refer people all the time, so, and we need to continue to do that. I wanted to ask about Mass Corps. So I wanted to hear a little bit more about some of the challenges that have been expressed by headmasters. I am concerned about also alt-ed being able to meet Mass Corps, and so I would love to also get the report that was done a while ago, because I haven't seen anything to kind of, I just want to better understand, before we say, before you started, there were small groups that were, that Laura put together, and there was a group around that, and we never got anything, and I would like to see that.
There was a presentation last year.
Yeah. But there was some written stuff also that I didn't, if maybe I missed it, but I don't remember ever, and I looked through all my stuff, so I would like to see that. But I'd like to better understand again some of the challenges, especially, when we look at Alt Ed. I'm really concerned about that, so I'd like to better understand that. And I don't know if that will come at another time. Okay, perfect. And I think also, the opportunity of MassCore is also how we can look at this high school redesign, and how can we really look at all of our students really being on a larger campus. And so how do we make it happen so that students can be anywhere learning in any, we don't have to think of like just these four walls in our little school, but like how can I go, to Fenway and take a class, or how can I go to BU and take a class, and how, so like having a campus feel, a classroom without walls type of thing. I'd really want to look a little bit more closely around that. I wanted to ask about the high school to teacher pipeline, and if there's more dollars that are being put in that endeavor.
There's a continuation of the program, but there's not a continued investment in the high school to teacher. There's not an increase in the funding for next year, other than the cost of their increased staff, the increased staffing cost of that. There's not a continued expansion, but they will continue the program next year.
And there's an additional staff, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying, sorry, it's the cost of their staff is going up, so there is, in the line item, it's going up, but there's not an increase in sort of program expansion or anything over the sort of level service costs of that program.
So one of the things that we want to do in terms of teacher diversity is to do grow your own programs here. And so I will be securing funding for that. It's a major initiative that I'm looking to do. I've been holding my powder on that to talk to the school committee about it, because I'm still developing the partnerships with some of the higher ed organizations around that, and also then securing the funding for it. But it will be working on an early college model for our own teachers. For our own, well, they will become our teachers.
Yep.
Our own students, grade 11, 12, where they earn their bachelor's degree,
Yep.
Starting in 11th grade, and then they're working with our BTU teachers through a residency while they earn their 4-year degree, and then they come back and they're guaranteed a job. There's a really unique opportunity to partner with one of our colleges and universities just this week, because they heard about this, for then those teachers of color to then, after 3 years of teaching, go and earn their master's degree for no cost. So we're really excited that there could be a way to recruit teachers of color from other states as well to come here and then work for upwards of 6 to 10 years for sure, because of these commitments that they would make to the district.
That's great. I definitely want to see that program. I think we keep talking about recruiting when we already have students here that would make excellent teachers, and I would definitely love to see also how we partner with other organizations and the city around looking at a plan for housing as well, because I think that's one of the biggest challenges, being able to live here. So we can, do the grow your own program, but ultimately if you cannot afford to live in the city, then it is really pointless. So I'm really very excited about that. And then my last comment is, around the literacy instruction around the cultural relevancy. And I think you're going to talk about this at another meeting around ethnic studies, so maybe I don't really have a question, but there'll be another presentation to really look at, because it's beyond like the literacy piece. And we heard students really talk about really wanting to have electives and have, courses that are more reflective of, where they come from and their heritage and background. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, right there.
Thank you. Is it okay to, so on MassCore, what I'm hoping we'll do, and what we're planned and ready to do this spring is to bring you all both a policy that sets the graduation requirement and also an implementation plan process, so that we have committed to a process, a timeline for responding to and resolving and ironing out all of the very many challenges that we know exist for our alt-ed students, for our quote-unquote old and far students, to our students new to country. There are ways that we can resolve all of those challenges. We'll need time, dedicated resources, and headmasters are already at the table giving their expert input, feedback, and insights about what we'll need to do differently. One of those things, for example, is that we need centralized and robust processes for transcripting. When a student comes new to us from another country, they may already have taken Algebra 1 and passed it with flying colors. We don't have a process right now for giving those students credit for that important work and learning and mastery that they've already gained. And we need to do that in order to be able to properly credit every student with what they've already gained, right? That'll be part of the process that we'll ask you all to give us the green light to work on, while at the same time already setting MassCore as the requirement. So we'll ask you for both. On ethnic studies, we have...
Can I say one more thing?
Of course.
Also, we are looking to phase it in so that, there's a gradual phase in with the class of 2025. Because it's not fair to say, okay, 11th graders now, you have to do this level of rigor in all of these courses. And so it will be with not this year's 9th graders, but the coming school year's 9th graders will be held accountable for that course sequence.
So to be clear, the first rollout would be 9th graders in school year 21-22.
Correct.
That's right.
What would be proposed when you present to us on the policy for MassCore.
That is right. That will be the proposal, because we need a year to develop all those courses, work out all those kinks next year, and teachers to get ready for the level of rigor, and for our 8th graders to be able to take Algebra 1 in 8th grade, so that then they could be ready for the 4-year sequence in high school to get to the really high bar of Algebra 2 trigonometry.
That then gets us to the idea of really rigorous electives, right? Both electives and potentially courses that count as MassCore that are required. So ethnic studies falls into that category. We're well on the way to developing high quality, rigorous set of courses, an intro course, an African American studies course, Latinx studies, Asian Pacific Islander studies, and Native American studies. In partnership with BSAC, Sociedad Latina, we'll be able to have something robust, and we expect ready to go at least in the first version for fall of 2020. And excited to bring that to all of you in collaboration with BSAC and partners.
Thank you. Lots of good work going on.
Get the magic touch. Thanks very much, Ms. Zayas and Vice Chair, for your questions. Mr. Tron has a brief question.
Yes. In fact, I do have a few, but I will just focus on one question for the time being. We've been talking about centralization, delegation of duties, school autonomy. In light of these soft landing schools issues, where are we standing on school autonomy on that? And is there a policy, or is there any kind of procedure that we should develop, or that we should follow, if there exists one, in terms of decentralizing that kind of autonomy, school autonomy, when it comes to these major concern of, in anticipation of school receivership or whatever that we have to deal with. Should we, if there is no policy on that, should we develop some to deal with the school autonomy when it comes to issues of soft landing or schools that have major issues? Thanks.
Yeah, those are good questions. So I did meet with the autonomous school chairs and the headmasters and principals, and one of the suggestions that they had was to review the current policies and to review the governance manuals. And so hopefully we will endeavor to do that over the next year and come up with some earned autonomies and some protocols and guide rails around that so that we can ensure a quality measure and that there's accountability around that, and then some assurances then when we give the autonomies. So we're looking to develop that over the next school year.
Mr. Tron, some of the things that we've talked about in the past, you heard some of the conversation earlier this evening around the selection of curriculum and some of the diversity of opinion, if you will, between school leaders and teachers on what curricula are appropriate for their schools. That's a form of autonomy. Another autonomy that we've seen in our schools with different organizational models like transformation or innovation or pilot is different budget autonomies with respect to budgeting for average versus actual salaries. And in a lot of instances this can be beneficial for a school, but at certain points in the life cycle of a school can create some headwinds for budgeting on a consistent basis and providing for the programs that our students need. So the superintendent and I have had a number of conversations around this. In the budget office, we've talked about this in years past and even more recently over this past year. And so I know that I look forward to hearing some recommendations from the superintendent on this, as well as I know a number of the other members do as well. So thank you for your question. So we already talked about Mass Core. I just have two other points I wanted to note from your presentation. I'll be brief. First of all, I'm really excited about the investment in the Chromebooks and technology. And I appreciate in your presentation you've laid out that there'll be additional investments at the CART level for classrooms in the elementary schools. And am I right to understand that the investment for Chromebooks for grades 7 to 12 will be a 1-to-1? And those will be take-home as well?
Each school will decide when they're ready to do take-home, but the goal is to get to take-home.
Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent.
And then it's for K2, it's 3-to-1, and for K2 is 3-to-1, and then for 3 through 6, it's 2-to-1. So I think it's 40,000 new devices are going out next fall.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Ms.
And
Robinson.
there's additional stipend at the schools for schools to be able to manage and get them out and that sort of thing. So that's been accounted for as well.
Ms. Robinson, it looks like you had an additional question.
Same issue. Given the fact that every family does not have good access to Wi-Fi, is there a city partnership that's going to help make that happen as well?
So, of course, equity is our #1 goal of the strategic plan. And so Mr. Mark Racine has been working with partners that we already have in our community. Maybe you could come talk about some of those partnerships that we have for Wi-Fi.
Sure. So we actually have a grant right now with, it's a nonprofit called the 1 Million Project. And that provides all high school students who need internet access with a home hotspot. That grant has been in place for about 2 years now. We've got about 1,200 students who have participated. We do actually anticipate over the next few weeks that number is going to be rising. And we've met with the program last week with the superintendent, and they've expressed an interest in being able to grow to accommodate any student in the high school grades who does not have home internet access. And that there is some talk behind the scenes of that expanding down grade levels as well.
And Comcast Internet Essentials does some work with our...
Yep, so we actually did an event here at the King with Comcast Internet Essentials to promote the program to families. They're right now the only low-cost internet program for all Boston Public Schools families. It is to all families who identify as free reduced lunch, and since the Boston Public Schools is 100% free reduced lunch, all families, all BPS families are eligible for that program. That's about, I think, $10 a month at this point.
High speed.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Racine. And thank you, Ms. Robinson, for that additional question. So again, we're very excited. Can't come soon enough, obviously. The other question I had was around, in your presentation, you just spoke briefly about the 25 new custodians and that concerted effort to clean the schools. Have we made a current year budget investment in new custodians and been successful in hiring?
You're asking about FY20, if there's, in this current year, we have not increased the number of custodians.
3 night supervisors.
We did increase the overall supervision of area managers and night supervisors. We also added some training staff to be able to help with increasing the oversight and training of our custodial staff. And next year is the expansion of the actual custodians in the buildings. The plan is to add 25 night custodians to buildings that do not have full-time night custodians already, to be able to do some more of the deeper cleaning that happens overnight when students aren't in the building.
So those 25, those are specifically tasked to the night shift. Great. And thank you for raising the issue of the supervisors as well. I know that those were current year hires, and those folks were intended to make sure that we're more equitably distributing our custodial resources in those critical night time frames across the district. And
checking for toilet paper and they're checking for soap and toilet paper and making, they're the quality check on the whole process. Yeah.
I'm going to deputize myself as a night supervisor for the King K-8 bathroom on my way out tonight. All right. Well,
I saw our custodians hard at work at the King.
That's I wouldn't doubt it for a moment.
Yes.
And on a serious note, I really do thank the district. I know that the district's been hard at work, our facility staff, our custodial staff over the last week plus in ensuring that custodians are out, building managers are out in our bathrooms and our kitchen facilities to make sure that paper towels are there, toilet paper is there, sanitary products, soap products, to make sure that our students are staying as safe as and sanitary as possible. So it's much appreciated that everyone's pitching in for this effort. So thank you again to our budget team and our academics team for their presentation tonight. And I appreciate Mr. O'Neill's questions and request for a supplementary presentation next week, and we'll work hard to get that set for our next budget hearing, which takes place on Wednesday, March 18th. And just as a reminder to folks, we'll be back at the Bowling Building for that hearing, and it will start at 5 p.m., an early start for us compared to normal. That will immediately precede the regularly scheduled school committee meeting on March 18th, and we're going to have a packed agenda, so it'll probably be a long night. Bring a sandwich. That hearing will be televised on Boston CBTV live and by recording. Just a final reminder to folks that will be watching the video, as well as those here in the audience this evening. We continue to post all budget documents online at bostonpublicschools.org/budget, and we continue to take any and all input through the generic email budget@bostonpublicschools.org, which is distributed to the superintendent and the budget team, as well as to us. And you can certainly email any of us directly or contact the school committee office. And our contact information is on the BPS website. I believe that's it. Thank you for an efficient meeting. Thank you once again to the King K-8 staff and leadership. Thank you to our cable office for coming out this evening and recording this for the wider viewership across the city. And I hope everyone has a good night. Wash your hands.